That one? Oh, Alex asked me to do something fun, so I thought I'd talk about something I haven't thought about for ages. What is consciousness? This is called the hard problem in bits of philosophy and stuff. So we're all conscious, hopefully, everyone here. What is it? So I remember going to a talk ages ago at university by a lady called Susan Blackmore, who is a psychology professor and science writer. And she was talking about consciousness. I never really thought about it hard. She's got this great book called Conversations on Consciousness from a few years ago. And it's got talks with people from philosophy, neuroscience, all sorts. And there's all sorts of different opinions. Some people think, oh, maybe it just arises from complexity. There's these things, philosophers' zombies. Is like, could you have someone that acts like Dale, talks like Dale, walks like, but they're not conscious? Could you have that? Does it come from some quantum thing? Is there God involved? Is there souls? Is things Chinese rooms, stuff like that? So there's all sorts of people's thoughts on it. Enter this guy, Michael Graziano, and he's a neuroscience professor at Princeton. And I can't remember how I read this book, but I did, and it's got all the answers. I'm going to tell you the secrets to life, the universe, and everything. So here we go. So he's got this thing called the attention schema theory, and the reason I think it's cool is it's like pretty simple. It's like somewhat satisfying. It's materialist, i.e., like, it doesn't need anything beyond physics. And it's supported by evidence from neuroscience. That's how he's like come to this conclusion. So first, let's try and like pin down kind of what we mean, because it's a bit of a loaded word. People think like mystery, kind of soul, like weird stuff. Like, what is it? So if I ask you to be especially conscious for a bit, just really quickly. Cool. Now, if I ask you to be especially aware for a bit. Okay, and like hopefully, well, I don't know. I kind of think that's the same thing, right? Awareness is just like, as far as words go, awareness is like consciousness, but minus a load of like baggage that comes with that word. So we think of awareness. So we think that the brain's got knowledge. The apple is sweet, the traffic is loud, the memory is of a cat. So that's like stuff that the brain stores somehow. We don't really care about how for now. But then we also have awareness of that knowledge. I'm aware of the sweetness of that apple. I'm aware of traffic being loud, etc. So like, it's that awareness we're like concerned with here. And I think that's immediately nice. We've lost like a kind of grubby word and got a nice like clean one. Here is a squirrel. So this is kind of like an analogy that he puts in the book. So he's got a colleague, right? And his patients come to his colleague and said, I've got a squirrel in my head. And the patient's like, I know it's not possible, but I'm like certain it's there. There's a squirrel inside. And it's like in the middle of my head. And the easy problem, like, is how the brain might represent the squirrel. It's got furs, it's got claws, it's got a location that's inside this person's head. And so we can kind of like prod the brain and go, yeah, like probably the location of the squirrel is in that bit of the brain, and the furriness is over there. So that's kind of the easy bit. But the hard problem, especially from the patient's perspective, is like, how is the squirrel, like, how is it there in their head? Like, they know it's there. Like, how is it there? So that's the hard problem. That's the like hard problem of consciousness. But it's not. It's a hard problem with squirrel. So if we, and this is a quote from the book. So if we all shared this man's delusion, we'd be certain of his existence. We'd agree collectively that we have it, and that we have no way to jump from neuronal circuitry to a squirrel. We'd be forced into the dualist position that the brain is somehow both a neuronal machine and, on the same time, on a higher plane, a squirrel. Which is a great quote. So here's the thing, like the squirrel, but swapped out with awareness. So again, the easy problem is like where the brain might store like the vividness of awareness, like it might store where the awareness is. Like most of us think, unless we're having like an out-of-body experience, we think awareness is somewhere inside our head. And again, the hard problem is like, how is it there? Like, what's it doing there? And in the squirrel, there's just not a squirrel. There's a description of a squirrel. And Graziano's argument is the same with awareness. There's not there's not like a thing, there's only just a description of it. So let's kind of go into that. That's like pretty abstract. So he talks about the arrow B problem. So some people like have an idea that consciousness maybe arises from like sufficiently complex things. I think I probably used to think this to some extent, you know, like people might say things like, oh, mate, is the internet conscious or something like that. And so here we have, like at the bottom, we've got some information processing, in this case, neurons. And then we've got this arrow A, and we're saying awareness just like arises from this. Now he points out like there's just a problem with all these kind of like theories of awareness. Is that for me or you to have this awareness, like eventually, I tell you, I'm aware of that the apple is sweet. So there has to be an arrow B coming back from the awareness, like back into the neuron, so I can like waggle my tongue around and say, tell you that I'm aware. And so there has to be an arrow B. And then once you've kind of agreed on that, then Occam's razor says, why even bother with the arrows? Awareness is just a description in the brain. So descriptions are a good fit. They can describe impossible things, like Middle Earth. That doesn't exist, but it's a description. That they're a good fit. So what is the description? Why is it like it is? So here we go. Awareness is a complex, continuously recomputed model that describes what it means, the conditions, dynamics, and consequences for a brain to attentively process information, which is a bit of a mouthful. So attention is like a neuroscience term. And so, you've got all the information coming in through your eyes, through your ears, through your like touch, whatever. And you need to filter it. It's too much information. Your brain like doesn't really know what to do with it. So there's bottom-up attention, which is like, if a tennis ball whizzes past your head, like there's some low-level processing that makes your awareness suddenly switch to that tennis ball. And then there's top-down attention, which is like, if you're playing Spot the Difference, you're like on quite a high level directing where your attention like is going to be focused. So a model of our own attention. So our brain has a model of our bodies. If you reach out and grab something, it kind of has a model of like what your limbs are going to do, and like if you overshoot the thing you're going to grab and that kind of thing. Like ditto with like tennis balls and stuff. So awareness is a model of something, but it's a model of our own attention. So it's not the I, it's not the like I'm aware of the sweetness of the apple. It's not the sweetness of the apple. It's the bit in the middle, and it's the description of that bit in the middle of the relationship between you and the thing. It's a description of attention. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. And then his evidence from neuroscience, I don't really understand most of this bit, is, so he's saying it's uncontroversial that we create models of other people's attention. Like we try and predict what people are going to do, what they're looking at, that kind of thing. So he's like, well, what if it's the same kind of thing, but it's about our own attention? And obviously, like it's obviously going to be way richer because you know everything, all the stuff that you're doing. And also there's like feedback loops, like with the Spot the Difference thing between you being aware of stuff and like that focusing your attention and that making you more aware of that thing. So like it's like a super rich model, unlike the one about other people. So he's saying if this is true, then we'd expect the same bits of our brain to tick over, like when we do an MRI scan or whatever, that kind of thing, maybe. So where would that be? We know, like from various bits of evidence, that our model of other people's attention are in these two places, and they react strongly to things like people reaching out to grab a cup, or like if you tell someone a story and say like, what is Bob going to do next? Then these bits like flash up. And then a bit of evidence that he's saying is that they also flash up when people are asked to redirect their own attention. So that's like his first bit of evidence. Like really, and this to me was just like mind blowing. So like your awareness, like saying it's like a description, and one of the aspects of the description is like, where is it? And it's in your head. like you can put someone in a chair or something and zap the right bit of brain and just induce out of body experiences, which is like pretty crazy. But so that kind of hints that like that quite core aspect of your awareness is like stored somewhere, and you can just like twiddle it around a bit. There are these weird things where everything in neuroscience seems to be about people like having things wrong with them. With my conclusion of the last half of the book. So there's a thing, blind sight, where patients, they won't be aware of objects in some bits of their vision. But if you ask them to guess, they'll tend to get it right. There's a similar thing, binocular rivalry, which all of us will happen to. So if you show an image in both eyes at the same time, your awareness like doesn't merge them; it like flips between each one. These are they're just kind of thrown in for fun. They're not inconsistent with the theory, but they don't really support it. And then, like, this is the thing. Apparently, there is some evidence for this. So there's hemispatial neglect. So you're a patient, you close your eyes, and you're asked to describe the layout of one of the squares around here, and they'll just describe all the things on the right-hand side, and they've totally lost awareness of everything on the left-hand side. And the attention schema theory predicts there should be two types of neglect, where the representation is damaged, and this should happen in one of those two places from earlier, and where the control of attention is damaged, and this should happen elsewhere. And apparently there is some evidence for this. Does anyone clever agree with this theory of consciousness? I'm not sure. I read this a long time ago. I don't really know. So someone might have shot this down quite comprehensively since I last read this book. But if anyone knows about neuroscience and philosophy and stuff and knows the answer, please let me know. And then, yeah, if you thought that was somewhat interesting, yeah, it's this great book, so Consciousness and the Social Brain by Michael Graziano. Go and buy it, and yeah, spread the news. Oh, thanks.